Welcome to this special edition of Strange New Pod. We are honored to be joined by not one, but two incredibly talented composers. You may know them from the work on some of the biggest franchises in film, television, and video games, like Star Wars Fallen Order, 12 Monkeys, The Dragon Prince, and The Flashpoint Paradox. Literally, these are just like some of my favorite things ever that I just wanted to talk about. Most recently, they've joined forces to bring their unique and diverse experience to create the score for Picard Season 3, which was released today on April 20th. Welcome to the show, Stephen Barton and Frederik Wiedmann.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So whenever we have someone come on the show to talk about Trek, we like to ask them what their history with Trek is. Like, were you a fan growing up? Do you have a favorite series? And who would be your favorite character?
I grew up watching Star Trek Next Generation. I was born in 81, so that just seemed to be on television all the time alongside Bonanza and the Flintstones. So that was kind of my childhood, was watching those three shows in a loop. And it was basically my first intro to anything sci-fi and, in particular Star Trek. So for me, always that part of the franchise and those characters have been the essence of Star Trek for me. When you say Star Trek, I think about Picard and nobody else. So yeah, it goes way back for me. And not only the show, but also the music. I think this 30-year Star Trek anniversary edition CD that I found in a drugstore one day, awesome, that had all these. It was a beautiful compilation of, Courage, Goldsmith, McCarthy, everything that has been done to this point in Star Trek. It was one of my first soundtracks that I'd ever owned. So it was not only an intro to sci-fi and TV, but also in film music in particular, which I think was probably one of the igniting moments for me that started off this path for me as a composer.
Amazing.
And I mean, very much a similar thing. I remember watching Next Generation when I was I was probably about 5 or 6 when it premiered. And it's the first sort of show I remember watching in terms of like a show that was not just for put on for the some animated thing or something for the kid. It was like the first show that everybody watched. Mm-hmm. And so that I mean, I think for me was that was the key part of Next Gen for me, which then going and seeing, I think I didn't see the movies probably till a number of years later. And so I very much thought of the main theme of Next Generation as the Next Generation theme. And then I think went back to the first time I ever saw motion picture was like, it's the Next Generation theme. Why are they using that? And then going,
so many people have that reaction when they go back and watch it.
I had that one too.
So yeah. And I think I mean, that's the interesting thing about Star Trek. I think, that in probably one of the big differences from it and Star Wars is that Star Trek has always been this very sort of it's this cultural barometer that kind of has run alongside so much. Whereas Star Wars, there was a burst of it and then nothing. And then, lots of like just chat about something. And then in the mid-90s, we got the prequel trilogy and it sort of came back again. But it was always very much the sort of, the Star Trek's been that sort of constant barometer throughout, and with so many offshoots as well. So I think that was a really interesting part of it for me, and that was kind of where I came to it. I was a massive Voyager fan. Voyager was kind of one of the series that I really, really watched, and DS9 as well. Nice. But particularly Voyager, I don't know why. Voyager, I think, hit at the right sort of time for me. Mm-hmm. So Next Gen was the first, but then everything subsequently. And probably seen. And one of the things I did for this was rewatch pretty much all of Next Gen.
Oh wow!
And a substantial quantity of DS9 as well. Obviously, with our Changeling thing, I wanted to sort of go back and look at that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to touch on real quick. I think it's amazing what you said. How TNG was kind of the first, and you see so many people on Trek social media this week and last week after the Enterprise came back talking about how this was their first Trek and like how important it is for them. So it's really cool that you pointed that out. Also wanted to say, I think it's ironic that you said you watched so much of Voyager, because on my way from picking up my son, I literally had it was like a 3 CD set of every single piece of Voyager music. It was literally on in my car on the way home. So just little coincidence. I love that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I was also born in 81, so I was 6 when TNG came out, and it was something that me and my parents would go and watch every week. We would gather together, and it was such a family thing. And this sort of love for this sci-fi franchise has just sort of been perpetual because it's just been constant for the past 30 somewhat years. And like when Picard season 3 was announced, the buzz was crazy. When they said that the TNG cast was coming back, I'm pretty sure every Trekkie's head just exploded. And it was amazing to see. Then that first episode came out, and the buzz it was still there, but everyone was like, the music has returned to this. It felt like something that we grew up with. Like it was this amazing passion that the fans had. Were you aware of how immediate and like beloved that your music like became for fans? Like it was like sort of immediate.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think it was one of those ones where, you know, that was, I think for both of us, I mean, particularly, you know, and now the nice thing is that we can talk about all of it. And, you know, a couple of the times when we've been talking early on about it, poor Freddie's had to sit here and be like, can't say anything. Because it was all like, and it literally talking about, like, he's like, I've got this great new theme that I can't tell you about because it's Borg related. So yeah, that's, no, I mean, I think we both picked up on it very, very quickly, and you know, and it was something that Terry had very much said actually from the outset. He's like, you know, we're gonna do this thing, and we're also gonna go there with the tunes. We're gonna go there with the material, and use it, and the, you know, you're playing with precious gems there, and that there's a really nice kind of, you know, I mean, obviously when you watch something like the sequence in 6 where you know, with the Fleet Museum, you know what that means in terms of, and every scene. I think what was great about it was though they're pulling up sequences like that, and you know, and also the, you know, Freddie could talk about the sequence in 9 where you the performances, you can see the actors know it too. I mean, there's, you know, almost my favorite moment I think of the entire season is when Seven is showing Jack the ships and going pulling them up, and she shows one, and she shows another, and then she pauses, and her finger just hovers for a second, and there's such a nice sort of nuance to the performance there where you know what she's doing, and that the fact that sort of actors can put in that little detail even when they know, you know, they're not looking at anything, they're just looking at green screen, and they're just going, you know, that kind of stuff. But you know how deeply ingrained it is in them that even when they're not seeing the visual cue, they know what that means to their character, and so that kind of stuff is great. So very much that if that hovering over the button is a sort of symbol of what the music was like for us to work with, that's kind of where we were going. I mean, every time you put one of those tunes in, you were like, ooh, okay, here we go. Here we go.
I have to say, like, I forgot, you know, being a professional musician and a soundtrack aficionado myself. I'm very good at recognizing themes and, you know, finding out when people do callbacks and stuff. But I kind of forgot how fans that don't necessarily have a musical background actually can do the same thing. So I only got to play with, I think, Alexander Courage, Goldsmith, the Voyager, and Next Gen theme. I think that's basically the only ones I was working with in my pieces. But Stephen went way above and beyond into Horner and even very early Star Trek. And I've been reading on Twitter what people have been picking up on. I'm like, wow, you guys have amazing ears. And like, often it's just like Stephen said, like a hint of it, or 3 notes just kind of pointing at something that could be the Wrath of Khan or whatever it is, you know. And they're like, oh yeah, this is what it is. I remember I picked up on it. This is cool. I like how you played this there. And I'm like, wow, that's great. I mean, this is exactly why we're doing it. But it was wonderful to see how they all remember all this so dearly.
Yeah, it's amazing how, like, I can't imagine how you guys mapped out the season just from picking different themes. Like, did you sit down with Terry to say this is where we wanted this to go, and like we wanted this to move to this theme later on in the season? Like, how did you map out how you would use these motifs and themes?
I think it's very much Terry's brainchild, start to finish. I mean, you know, he's had the whole thing figured out, not just story-wise, but also musically. I feel like the whole map was in his head. So when he worked closely with Drew Nichols, our amazing editor, on the temp track, the map was basically created in the cutting room, which freed us up freed us up to basically focus on how to make it amazing, because it structurally was all given.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Terry's plan, which was brilliant.
I mean, you have to know with Terry is he's kind of savant with music. It's kind of insane, and lots of people joke. They go, "Oh, directors, he's really good with music," and that's standard line of composer bullshit of like, kind of, "Oh, directors, he's amazing, he's so musical." Da, da, da. Most of them are like, actually, kind of like, oh, they're fine, but it's like he literally, I kid you not, you could play him any cue from all 10 hours of this and say which where, and he'll tell you exactly what cue it is. He'll probably tell you what the cue's called. He'll tell you exactly where it appears in the show, exactly what scene, and he can not only do that, he can still do that for all 4 seasons of 12 Monkeys.
Wow. I was just gonna say, you saying that he's a very like musically sound. Right before, actually, it was right when we got the screeners. I'd seen Todd Stashwick and things. I didn't realize it was him. I immediately fell in love with Shaw, and I had been on the fence for so long about 12 Monkeys, and finally Terry was like tweeting about it, and I was like, screw it. I'm finally, before Picard even comes out, I bought the Blu-rays and binged all 4 seasons, I think in 2 weeks. And the music on that show is just incredible as well. And I mean, it's just that's so funny. He is brilliant. Obviously, you guys are brilliant as well.
Yeah,
he will literally also not. And the funniest thing is like it's also with Star Trek as well, with the musics from Star Trek films, particularly. Right. He knows 1 through 6. He knows encyclopedia level kind of knowledge of the music, where he'll pull it immediately. And the funniest thing is he'll be faster than the music editors. I mean, they'll be like, like we had Matt Freeman, who's probably one of the best music editors in the business, and he's like incredibly quick and incredibly sort of got a sort of organizational mind that can really sort of remembers all the bits and says, okay, well, that bit of this and that. But Terry can match him without the computer in front of him. He can literally say, yeah, it's that, and Matt pull it up, and sure enough, it'll be that, and it'll be named exactly what he's can, and he'll sometimes remember the queue number as well. Be like, it's like 304M31, and I'm sitting there going, how do you remember this shit? But it's just because he just has this sort of that sort of mind that's able to kind of really sort of pick up on those things, and funny enough, I mean, when we wrote the Titan theme in episode 1. Is that I tell other composers, I say like, oh yeah, he likes to sit in the back of the room while he writes, and most composers would run screaming from the room in horror at that. They think that's the worst idea in the world, and to be honest, it probably is with most people, or with 99.999% of people, but with Terry it's actually kind of great, because he's one of those people he's very good at asking the right questions and sort of saying, so I literally had the first half of that theme. I knew whether that was something that came very quickly, and very much inspired by what he was saying, where he's like, look, these are boats, and this is a ship leaving harbor. This isn't just a ship leaving dock. In a space dock sense, there's this elegance here to the way that these things that fly and leave before they go to warp. And he's like, that's what Horner brought to it, is this almost sort of slightly Horatio Hornblower sort of esque nauticality to it, that you're like, okay, how can we bring this back? Because I think that is something that had been put aside from Trek for a while, and we're sort of like, well, if we're going to use this season as a way of stepping back and saying, like, let's look at the whole picture and pay homage to the whole legacy, not just Next Gen, or not just Picard season 1 and 2, but let's just wide angle lens this whole thing, which is, I mean, a lot of what Goldsmith did on First Contact, and why First Contact works so well, is because you just feel everything there. And we were like, we wanted that same feeling, and very much talking to Frakes about it as well, saying like what were you trying to do there? And he's like, well, we wanted a theme for First Contact that was the movie theme. It wasn't just the sort of, here's the theme at the end where it plays on something, or didn't have a specific thing. It has a much bigger sort of nostalgia for spaceflight and legacy. And so that's why we use that on the LCARS thing, and also as a massive clue as well. But we didn't say that at the time, obviously, because we were like, quiet about that bit. But when you use it on LCARs, it's because like you look at everything with LCARs, and the first thing anyone ever does when they go on one of these sets, particularly the Enterprise D set, is you want to press the buttons. You're just like, here it is in front of you. You can touch it. Wow, this is so cool. And so that same sort of wow, this is what this world has created, is very much what that character thing is. When Lily, she's pointing the phaser at Picard, and he opens the doors and says like, well, look, there's the Earth.
It's a long way down.
It's very much that presentation of well, here is what this legacy has created, and so that was the genesis of that, really.
Oh, yeah,
Eric, how many times have you and I texted each other like, noticing like all those little cues, and now it's like Terry would probably like blow us out of the water.
Yeah, we were sitting there, we're like, this is we're watching a 9-hour movie or a 10-hour movie. This is amazing, and we kept on talking about how this felt so different. Like the audio landscape has changed from TOS to even to TNG, and then from TNG to now modern day scoring, and this felt way more like a movie. Like we were watching a movie every week. Was like that conscious decision. How did that really come about? Was it from all of that talk about like when you were talking about how First Contact had those thematic those themes? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. And I particularly, and we like actually, I mean, Freddie, you should speak to episode 9, because I mean 9 and 10, we basically went in and said like, this isn't TV anymore. We're not making a TV show here at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it did feel like scoring a movie every week, really. The episodes are very long, lots of music, and there's so much happening within them. It's not, I've done a lot of TV. This did not feel like TV music at all, or TV writing. It really
had a
felt
running
like
joke.
Movies. Yeah,
we had a running joke with the orchestra actually, where there was one cue in episode 7, which how long is that thing? It's like 7 minutes long or something, or 8,
yeah,
6, 7.
7.5 actually.
And it's all one cue, and we record, did the first take of it. So no, I was like, by the way, this is for a TV show.
Yeah,
because TV shows don't do that.
No,
I mean, it's like
not at all anymore.
And it's the other thing. I mean, we very much said at the outset, and we said, and was a vision that actually, that Freddie was instrumental in allowing us to finish, was that we came into this thing saying, okay, we're going to write everything. We're not going to do what most TV shows which will do, which is write a couple of hours of music and cut it everywhere, and sort of use, every time you could reuse a cue, just reuse a cue, cue done, box ticked, move on. We said, okay, well, we're not going to do that. And obviously that had very large implications that only became clearer as every episode came on. And I got to about episode 5, and I was just, middle of episode 6, I think I was just dead, because I'd already written 5 hours, 4.5 hours, 5 hours music-ish by about the space of about 3 months. And we're recording the stuff as well. So it's all got to get orchestrated and put on paper and, recorded with orchestra. And it's just ridiculous quantity. And I literally, Terry at one point was sort of like, he's like, well, we might have to track some of this because I don't want you to die. Literally, I mean, that was what he said. We had he came into my room and he's like sat down on my sofa and he's like, I don't want you to die doing this. He's like, I know we set this goal. Well, yeah, well, virtually. And then, Drew and he and I were chatting, and we were like, mercifully, what the sort of one of those things where the universe sort of just works out in the perfect way, where we were like, okay, well, what's in episode 7? Finishing 6 now, but like, what's in 7? And we pulled it up, and literally 80% of the temp, at least 80% of the temp was Freddie. And we're like, okay, I think that's the universe telling us to do something. And so Terry's like, literally at the back of the room, he's like, I'm emailing him right now. I'm emailing him. I'm sending him an email right now. And so that was.
Yeah, and that's the email I didn't actually see because it ended up in my spam folder.
Oh no!
For an entire week, I had no idea this had happened. This amazing opportunity that came my way, it was just sitting in my junk folder. And then thankfully they made another attempt through my agency.
Yeah, we tried. We were like, no, we really want him.
Yeah, after a week, I went through my spam to clean up, and I'm like, holy shit, Terry emailed me. And he was like, hey, I'm Terry Matalas. I'm a showrunner on Picard. We're interested in working with you. And I'm like, how? That's been in there for a week, and I had no idea.
So you came on late in the process.
I came on late, yeah. I mean, thankfully, God you know, the stars seriously aligned that they found me through that way. I mean, I didn't, that never happened. It was
That's
amazing.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
absolutely wild.
And especially considering that the score that the score in question that they used for Temp was not a very famous movie. So the fact that Drew the editor actually stumbled across that on Spotify for some miraculous reason is that blows my mind. That in itself, because it's it's a small Aussie sci-fi film called Occupation Rainfall. I don't know if you guys saw that.
No.
Alien invasion film. It's on Netflix.
Well, now I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's a fun romp, and the filmmaker Luke Spark is incredibly ambitious and amazing. So I recommend watching it if you like alien invasion stuff. But it was one of those things. Yeah, it's great. It's good. But yeah, it's just astronomical chances of that ever happening, really. So anyway, we're very grateful for those coincidences to all coincide, and the fact that I, could do it time-wise too.
Yeah,
because it was like, are you ready to go now? Like, drop everything. Here's episode 7.
The fun part was we didn't have a plan B. We literally, because the problem was it's like one of those things we inherited very much. Like, so this was obviously its own thing, and the episodes are much, much bigger than anything in season 1 or 2. Really, I mean, it's a very, very different show. And at the end of the day,
yes.
At the end of the day, we were just like, well, okay, but we've inherited basically a budget and a schedule from this thing, which only had, there was probably only 15, 20 minutes of music. Well, some episodes might have only had a little bit of new music, but, because once it got to episode 5 or 6, they would track. And that's normal for TV. That's not a bad thing. That's the way TV works. I mean, the idea, if you go into a TV show and if you go to a network and say, hey, we have a 10 episode, 10 times 45, 50 minutes. So it's about 500 minutes of television. And we want to score every minute of it. You get laughed out of the room.
I was about to say, would they just laugh you out of the room? I was shocked.
No chance. Yeah.
I was shocked when I saw how many tracks were on the track list for the score. It's incredible.
It's under half of what we did.
Oh, wow.
Under half. I mean, I think we clocked in just under 7 hours. I think if you put everything together, and if you add the source music, it's over 7 hours. But it's all recorded, orchestrated with orchestra, and the only other way we were able to do it was because we have the most insane orchestra in LA that were able to. I mean, the finale session we probably pounded through like 41 minutes on one of our sessions. Wow. I think we'd recorded in one 3-hour session. Which is literally, again, if you ever went to like an orchestra contractor, or you went to someone, who is planning a scoring session and say, we're going to try and record 41 minutes in a 3-hour session, they'd laugh you out the room. They'd be like, it's never going to happen. But we just at the beginning of the session just said, we're going to try and do something insane here. And they just read so brilliantly. And I think also that sense of what was happening and what we were trying to do just clicked, and they were so just first take was great, second take was perfect, and we just occasionally punched in for some noises and then moved on. Wow. And never did I actually ever feel that we compromised on quality, weirdly enough, awesome. Which is just I think there was one take where we picked up a thing and we had to like pick something up because someone sneezed, and it was but we literally I mean, that's and the wonderful thing is we can punch in, literally we're like, okay, drop the tape there, boom, boom, record, bam, out. And it's like, the beauty of digital editing is just like you can do anything. So yeah, I mean, just I don't know if everyone will ever quite let us do it quite like this again. And I don't know if we would necessarily try and do it like this again, because I think it's one of those ones where hindsight, we were like, wow, that was insane. But if you told us at the very beginning, like what we were going to try and do, I think we would have freaked, the studio would have freaked even more. And that's just the nature of the beast. But it was one of those things where just everyone kind of knew it had to happen. And so we didn't really ask, like, we didn't really at any point go, nah. Afterwards, we're like, bloody hell.
That's the whole ask for forgiveness later thing, right? Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. And, and absolutely fair credit to CBS and Paramount Plus. They 1,000% once I think they saw what we're trying to do, like had our backs with it. And it was one of those ones where we, in our last session, we were like, we need this. And, Terry went back to them, I think on the run up into the last session, the finale, and said to them, look, this episode's 63 minutes long. That's 25 minutes longer than one of the episodes in season 2.
Right.
You can't think of this as just an episodic thing. So
No,
So,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's
what you guys have done is absolutely special, and I know that you already mentioned Stephen, but we have to talk about the Titan theme some more, or as it's called, Leaving Space Dock on the score. I have to tell you, just immediately, I'm going to fanboy for a second. This is maybe in my top 5 favorite Trek themes ever. I have not stopped humming it.
Same.
It's so familiar, right? Yet something so completely original, right? It, like you mentioned, it's got some Horner and Wrath of Khan. It's got Goldsmith. Freddie was talking about how fans notice all these little things. I get some Insurrection in there, right? Like,
Yes.
there's
I would definitely agree with that.
yeah, it just, most of all, it just screams Star Trek. Talk to me about creating the Titan theme, or now actually, as it's really known, the Enterprise G, which is awesome in its own right.
I mean, I think this was one that was very the strangest thing about it was that, like, so I knew that we wanted to do something that was in the vein of more in the vein of Voyager and more in the vein of Deep Space Nine, in the sense of, like, we knew it wasn't going to be a big March thing. We knew it was going to be much more in the sort of the expansive kind of thing. And so I kind of knew the setting of it. I knew the architecture of what it was going to look like, and then kind of also then knew what the orchestration was going to be like, because of, that was something Terry and I very much talked about, the Horner thing, and saying, okay, well, he's like, those highest moving, the crazy sort of violin lines, kind of playing in above it. So he's like, that's absolutely something that's got to be part of it. And the first quarter, or the first chunk of the bit, came very, very quickly. It was like almost the first thing I wrote, I think. Just kind of had that that bit in my mind already. The hard part was where it went. And it's with all of those things, I think all the great Star Trek themes have an almost an inextricable arc to them, where it just like, it just keeps and I think of the Voyager theme tune, where it hits that really high last trumpet note before it hits the ba 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 ba, but that ba da 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 da.
Yep.
I mean, it's just that
right near the end, right?
Yeah, and it's just the best moment. And I think it's even, I forget in the titles, I think certainly on like season 1, it even hits with a visual cue. It's like a sort of, like a lens flare thing.
Oh, like, the sunburst, and then like Voyager pops in.
Yeah. And you're just like, yeah, okay. So it's that making a tune pay off like that is trial and error. And literally Terry sat in the back of the room, and I sat at the piano, and I literally played around the first half of that tune hundreds of times, kept on trying things out, going, okay, what about this, what about that? And every now and then he'd be like, I like that, what was that, okay, no, keep that, okay. So, and I'd like jot it down. And so, I jokingly, I jokingly, but really only half jokingly say, we completely wrote it together, because there was a lot of the bits where he's like that, that's what I want, that go, keep try that again, okay. And then we gradually pieced it together. And I think he sort of, he kind of came in the room at like 2:00, and by about 5:00 he was like, yeah, okay, I think that's pretty good. And so I then spent the rest of the evening making a mock-up of it, and making a proper orchestrated out version of it. And I sent it to him, and I went home and went to bed, and I woke up to an email saying, okay, you got it.
Nice.
Now you have to figure out what to do with it. But so yeah, that was kind of the genesis of that. And that was sort of towards the end of February, I think, of last year.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that was how that came about. And but then also you have that awkward sort of 2 weeks after, and where you sort of sit around going, is it something else? Is it something else? Do I recognize? Am I just remembering this from somewhere? Have I just written someone else's tune? Kind of thing.
No, you didn't.
Which is what we do.
It's so good. It's just so good. Yeah.
It's always if Terry doesn't recognize it, it probably doesn't exist.
Right.
This was the benefit.
Everything.
Yeah.
I
knew literally, and I had a couple of other people I played it to. I said, like, I didn't even tell them what it was. I said, like, do you recognize this? Is this something? And then no one had anything, and I was like, okay, cool. I think we actually got a good one. But yeah, I mean, it's a remarkably tricky thing, and I think the only thing that was good about it was that we were so close up against our first scoring session for episode 1. I didn't have any time to really think about that bit of it. So yeah.
So we talked about this earlier, but Legacies, the track where Seven and Jack are going through the Fleet Museum, it hit every single heartstring when we saw that episode. We were bawling when we were talking about it, and it's such a beautiful track because it feels like there's this romantic feeling behind it. Like there's a longing behind every single theme that's played there, and you can see it in the eyes of Jack, and you can see it on Seven's face. Could you talk us through the process of creating this incredible moment?
Well, that one's a really good one because there was a very good map in the sense that the picture kind of maps out the basic structure of it, and I think, like in sort of some of the stuff in episode 9, I think a similar kind of thing where it's like roughly what you need where, but it's a question of like more of presentation. And so, for example, like the Deep Space Nine theme on the Defiant. My big thing there was like which bit of the Deep Space Nine thing, because I know we've only got like 6 seconds to make this thing land. So it's whether you use the and then, or the some of the stuff from later on, the sort of like slightly more sort of melismatic, like longer version of it.
It's so funny with that theme because you could do so much with it, right? Like you could have even done the just like the bum 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 bum, like right from the beginning, right?
I love that bit of it as well, and I think that was one of those ones where we were like, okay, what lands the strongest, and also register-wise stays out of the range of the dialogue, because that's the other biggest thing. We're trying to also make sure we can still hear the dialogue. So a lot of scoring is that maneuvering around the frequency range of where your dialogue is sitting. So that one I think was one of the I probably tried it in 10, 15 different ways of like what, and also exactly, do you start the tune right on the cut to the ship, or do you start it in the reaction? Do you start, you've got sort of a million little ways of timing it out. And then, I think the sort of the slightly tricky one was then actually with the Enterprise A of actually, because that particular it's quite hard to sort of it's quite hard to harmonize. Actually, it's quite an angular tune that sort of like only very strongly suggests the particular harmony that it had in the show. And so I knew I wanted to do something that was basically it went there, but it had to get almost immediately out of it. So yeah, that one was a slightly tricky one as well, but Voyager was the one. I mean, and also Voyager was the one that I most hit for me as well. And I think particularly because Jerry's performance in that scene is just
she deserves an Emmy for that.
She
that
really scene, it is just and everything about the way and the way it's shot is so well done as well. And the speed at which they shoot the stuff, and the fact that they're not looking at anything, they're just looking into space. Well, someone says you're looking at Voyager right now, on the thing, and it's just that blows me away. So yeah, that one was all, and a lot of that was about pairing out the orchestration actually. So the orchestration it's quite full for the previous two. And then it actually goes down to what the bit of and that's sort of it's harking after the very, very final episode of Voyager. There's a couple of times where they instead of going big, they go small. It's sort of everything sucks out and drops out, and it's like there's I'm trying to forget the particular moments as well, but it comes down to just 2 lines. There's just the tune and then just a counter line, and it's very sort of spare and portentous and kind of amazing in that way. And it's so that was one of the things there. It was like, it wasn't sort of like, let's play a big Voyager moment, but it's actually almost like pull back and just give you the sparest version of the Voyager theme tune, and make it as sort of poignant as you possibly can. So yeah, I mean that was, and then I think that actually then the really fun one was actually going back to the well, there's a couple of themes actually at the end. There's actually 3 layered in a very short space of time. That you have the whole whale thing. You have that was a score I think that was sort of slightly maligned because it was basically they had the Jerry Goldsmith and Horner era, and then you have this score that's sort of slightly stand apart from the others, but
it's still a great that's still a great
such
score,
a great
though.
Score. Yeah. So there's that, but over the top of it there's the Horner Klingon theme as well, which we've always used as our kind of subtle Klingon theme, as because obviously the Jerry Goldsmith one is balls to wall, and it's great. but we wanted to also use the other one as well. So that's woven in, and then there's a very short snippet of there's a little on right when Jack gets the idea, there's the it goes ba-da, ba-da. This 4 little note thing comes in, which is actually the Alexander Chorus thing. So in 90 seconds you actually have 7, I think, themes in total.
Wow.
Which gave the person doing the music the cue sheet for the music a heart attack, because it's like music by it just goes on and on and on and on. It had to run onto a second line and it broke their template, and anyway.
Oh boy. Oh,
crazy puzzle. My goodness.
Yeah.
But what a result. I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think the hard thing is, like, because these pieces, they come from all these different places, but how do you make it cohesive and like a piece of music you can listen to and feel like it's one piece when there's so many things in there? So anyway,
listen, I reviewed I was writing my article to review you guys' score yesterday, and I listened to the tracks multiple times, and it just that track and so many, all of it. I mean, I'm not trying to like be super fanboy, but they all just hit perfectly. It's the truth.
we said that when we got the soundtrack, we would just constantly have it on, and we have had it on our radio since we've gotten the preview, and now that it's released today, like it's just been constantly playing in my house.
Stephen, you kind of told us the story on how Freddie came onto the show, and Freddie, I have to talk to you about probably one of the best tracks on the album, and not just the album, but what the track goes along with in Dominion. Listen, I'm a sucker for long piano and string pieces, and on its own, it's just already beautiful. But just how it slowly unwraps, right, with Vadic and her backstory until she's finally in control of the Titan. What did you want to accomplish here? Because it's such a deeply layered piece of music, and just hits in so many different ways.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice by Terry to do something like this versus what you could have done with this whole ending, which is standard scoring of the action and the drama and the takeover and the evil villain taking over the ship music, But I think what sets it apart instrumentally as well, because we don't start a whole lot of cues with just solo piano and solo cello. I think this is right off from the get-go, you kind of know you're in for something.
Right.
In for a bit of a different ride. And the idea was to have this sort of quasi-classical piece rather than a score piece to start this whole scene, that you almost start to wonder, are they listening to this? Is this source music coming from some thing, or is Vadic listening to this in her head while she's invading, or what's going on? But you quickly notice it is score. And I think what it does is having this very long emotional crescendo while playing a little bit of the action. There's some pace to it, but it's not really action music per se. And I think what it does is it tilts your whole perception of Vadic that you've had to this point as she's doing this, because you finally learned about her motivations. And I think it helps you kind of understand why she's doing all of this. So you're almost like, while up to this point you were pro-heroes against the villain, now you're a little bit on edge on, oh wait, but I kind of get it now, and I kind of feel bad for her. And that's what that music kind of does. It puts
perfectly.
your whole belief system a little bit on upside down and makes you question your belief choices up to this point, which is an interesting thing. I always find villains that you identify with and that you kind of root for subconsciously, whether you want to admit it or not, more interesting than just a straight up villain that is evil, and there's no question about it. And villains are always the heroes in their own stories, and I think that's what this piece particularly brings out, that there is that component to Vadic that we didn't really know up until this point. And I think that choice of music gave it a nice push into that direction, which I think makes the story just that much more interesting, and her character.
Yeah. No, I mean, by the end of that episode, like, am I mad to see Vadic in the captain's chair? Yes. But do you sympathize? Yeah. I mean, how very un-Starfleet of Starfleet to be experimenting on her. She's got a very good reason to be doing what she's doing, and the music does help you sympathize with her so much. It was
an interesting theme for me, like taking a villain and making them so relatable, because I don't know if you guys have seen, one of my first shows ever was Green Lantern, the animated series by Bruce Timm.
Yep.
And it's a similar thing with the Red Lanterns, because they were basically just retaliating for the stuff the Guardians did to them, ages ago, and they destroyed their entire world and nobody really took responsibility with the Manhunters. And so Atrocitus was trying to destroy the Green Lanterns. It's basically again, he's trying to be the hero for the Red Lanterns to avenge what had cruelty had happened to them. So it was very similar, kind of weird place for me to go back to emotionally treating a villain musically. So it was nice to go full circle here.
I enjoyed someone that I saw, one person online was like, they were like, Starfleet did like awful things and like stuff like that. There's got to be something. And I always wanted to be like, did you watch DS9?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, they've done it a number of times.
pretty much there. I mean, it's like
they literally went to Romulus to go kill someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just this thing, and I think that's what actually makes it. What makes Trek very interesting is that people often say back to the early days of and the optimism, and I think that's the thing is that what's nice about this one is that we do have the optimism, but there is also the willingness for it to still be human, and it still be a very much a kind of social barometer and these kinds of questions. Because I mean, I think and nothing sort of particularly sort of sets that in mind to me as well is there's the moment in 9 where we're right at the end of episode 9 where you're looking at the Enterprise D, and it really is summed up in this. Here's this thing of like this fantastic moment of we're launching the Enterprise D again, and so, but in the story terms, they're pulling a museum relic out to face off against an entire fleet that's completely armed to the teeth and is currently engaged in trying to destroy space dock and make Earth's defenses fall. So you're like, nothing is good here. I mean, this is not good that they're pulling out I mean, we love the Enterprise D, but like they're pulling out something out of the Smithsonian to go and try and fight the entirety of the invading fleet. So there is something there that's very interesting about sort of how sometimes I think our feelings towards something color our reactions to something, and sometimes in a way that where if you actually just stop for even a second and be like, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't really make sense. So yeah. It's fun.
I want to quickly talk about some samples I was not expecting to hear in the finale this week, and that's from Dennis McCarthy's Star Trek Generations score.
Yes.
But when Jean-Luc, Riker, and Geordi, right, they're on the bridge and they're saying goodbye to this ship that has been a very important part of it. I know Eric and I's lives and your guys' lives, for the last time. I was just so incredibly here for it, right? The movie itself, Generations, a little bit, a sour note for fans.
Yes.
But I adore that score.
Yeah.
What do you make, like, what made you guys go back and sample this for that moment?
I think just because that cue in particular was something that we knew. I mean, and actually, there's a few references to Dennis's stuff earlier.
Yeah.
But that moment just felt so right in that sense of sort of as a way of saying, hey, look, even if you didn't particularly like that movie, there's some unbelievable things in it, and there's some unbelievable music, and that cue in particular is just, it's so poignant, and this moment is it was one of those ones. I think that Drew Nichols may have like originally sort of put that in and sort of slid it up, and we watched it and we're just like, yeah, what else would you do? Yeah. I mean, what else could you do? And so what was really nice about that was sort of being able to then sort of use that as that. And Terry, that was, a really good example of Terry having a very clear idea of what he wanted. He's like, well, we have this section of it. I'd like to use that and re-record it and but what I want to do is use it as a tee up to the Titan theme when we cut back. So he's like, and we've got 2 last statements of the Titan theme, or well, 3 technically. You have that one where it cuts to space dock. Then you have the names mean everything sequence, and then you have the very beginning of the when the card game book leading into the stars cue. So I think that's. The key thing there was it was like this was a piece that when it ends in the original version, it just goes and it's just the ending. But he was like, no, that's where you tee it up into the next thing. And he's like,
I loved so much that it went right into the Titan theme. Yeah.
So I mean, and that was very much I think also our moment to sort of give a big thank you to Dennis McCarthy as well, because I mean, because he's someone who did unbelievable amounts for the franchise.
Does not get enough credit.
And definitely definitely is always the sort of, person go, oh, and Dennis McCarthy. You're like, well, the guy wrote hours and hours of great music. And we have our Ron Jones moment in episode 3. And where there's a couple of Ron Jones moments. I mean, and there's pretty much everybody I think gets a look. I mean, we have a Cliff Idleman moment, we have a Leonard Rosenman moment. I mean, I think that was very much the thing of saying, like, you have to look at the whole board and look at the whole picture, and it doesn't. Every single person who's come onto it has brought something to it, and that's it at a sort of watershed moment like this in terms of what this means for Trek. It's like it's we have to celebrate all of that, and so that was very much the idea.
Yeah, I think when we had talked about the whole season, we talked about how the score really was honoring the past while striving to look towards the future, like. You would take upon something that was pre-made or that was already there, but you would build upon it, and it just sort of felt like this is Star Trek moving forward. Was that how you guys came about the whole sort of creating the score? Like you wanted to honor all of these greats from the past and then just see where it takes us in the future? Because I could see so much of this leading into Star Trek Legacy if that ever comes.
Well, it's funny, like I kind of made that my own interpretation of what Stephen had done leading up to the point when I started. Nobody actually said that specifically the way you just put it, but that's exactly what I understood. I was like, okay, so he did something very traditional. It's very much in the vein of Goldsmith and all those greats, and the themes are there and the orchestration is similar and you instantly know what it is. But there's also this kind of modern component that pushes it a little bit into our century, the little bit of synths that are in there, the modern percussion that they didn't have back then, and more modern reharmonizations of the older themes too. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But yeah, nobody, I don't think Terry actually ever articulated it that way, but it kind of organically, I think, happened. I don't know if you guys had this as initial plan, Stephen, but that's certainly how I saw it.
No, I mean, you picked up on it right away, and I think that was one of the things. Also, we were just, I think the reason why Terry often didn't sort of necessarily articulate that in a specific way was it was like if it hadn't come across, then I think. I'm a great believer that if you're trying to do something musically, I mean, like one of the lessons best lessons I ever got from the guy who's my mentor was Harry Gregson Williams, who did all the Shrek movies and the Narnias and things like that, and Ridley Scott and Tony Scott movies. But his thing was he was like, well, if you're going to play a cue to a director, never sit there and talk about it for 2 minutes before you hit play. He said, because if it doesn't come out in the music, it doesn't matter how long you talk about it. He said, also partly said because you're not going to be there at every screening to sort of go, well, hello audience, this, what I'm trying to do with this music cue is the following. Is that like it's got to come across in the music or you're fucked, basically. Yeah. So that I think was the thing. I mean, and the moment, with the first cues that when they came in when we were listening, that was just like we were like, yeah, it's her. And that was almost a nice validation actually of like, it's obvious what we're trying to do here. But it, and I think it's also very interesting in the sense where you just you're it's there's some sort of awful terms that have sort of gotten flung around for the fan service and memberberry thing, and it's like look, it's that's absolutely fine. I mean, different people have different sort of gradations of where things fall on the scale of that, and that's okay. That's always going to be the case. But I think I saw someone say like, oh, they brought back LaForge, and they've got both of his daughters, and that's like a memberberry, and I'm like, they're his daughters? Like, should we have just ignored them?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it seems to me plainly obvious that some kind of something, if everyone's family was just like, oh, somewhere off in the stars, you'd be like, okay, well, except for Alexander, who, just so obviously got short shrift.
Wait, who's he? Who's Alexander? Who's that?
We forgot about him. Yeah. But
I want to stay on building for the future a little bit. We actually have some questions from our Captain's Table Collective members, Simon and Chris. Those are our executive producers. That's a tier of our Patreon that you can join. You can go to patreon.com.
Hey, Simon and Chris.
Strange New Pod to check that out. But there's obviously been talk, and Terry's all about it, and the fans are all about it. You've seen probably all the fan posters and fan art that's already been made about Star Trek Legacy. And if it was greenlit, fans would get to see the return of maybe one Captain Shaw, played by the amazing Todd Stashwick, who we had the pleasure of talking with. Were there any inklings while creating the Picard soundtrack about making a motif for Shaw? Like, is there any like mode you would have like composed in for him?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think, it was really interesting because obviously his introduction is it's so sort of like we present the absolute sort of perfect picture of like the launching of a starship. It's this wonderful thing, amazing thing, and we cut right to it's
Dipshit
like sure,
from
Like,
Chicago.
and so that I mean, absolutely, it's such the antithesis of it, and I mean, of what one sort of expects, and it's not even quite in the same way of like when we've seen plenty of kind of like dipshit admirals. I mean, or like people come and it's not like Star Trek hasn't had its dipshits before, but I think it's such an interesting performance, and it's very much sort of tapping into kind of. I mean, we also with the 12 Monkeys, we also use occasionally when he come up, we'd be like, oh, it's Space Deacon, But I mean,
he really is though. He really is.
It just kind of goes there, So he sort of didn't have anything particularly thematic because of that, and I think it was almost like the sort of eschewing of giving him something, because it would almost like his character would, if his character could sort of see beyond the fourth wall, his character would be like, I don't want a fucking theme. Yep. That's almost the thing. But I mean, I think Terry. I don't know the full specifics of it, but they have an amazing way they could. It was one of those ones when he died. I think and also the transition, by the way, of people like going like, we hate this character. He's dead naming Seven. He's an asshole to everybody. Like this isn't Star Trek. Fuck all of you. To we'll riot if he dies, and then pretty much kind of we're going to riot because he just died.
It's so funny. I have to interrupt you real quick because it's funny. I live in Philly, and our hockey team mascot is Gritty. And when he was first introduced, Philadelphia were like, what the fuck is this? This is god awful. And then the internet started talking shit about him, and then Philly just went full Philly. Like, he is our murder muppet. You do not talk shit about him. We will die for him. And then it became this just beloved love for Gritty. It's like total like what happened with Shaw. Weird analogy, but it works.
Yeah. It's totally true. And so I mean, I think sorry, that was fun. I almost diverted and forgot what the question was. But no, I mean,
I'm writing a motif for Shaw, kind of like a mode you compose in. Yeah,
I think if he the way they would bring him back if they could, and the way they would do that, maybe. I mean, I think it's like it's tricky though, because it's like what the sort of characters where they're sort of I mean, the one of the worst things you can do musically is play for humor. Actually, that's one of the funniest. The reason why Shaw's sort of deadpan humor can be funny is because we don't ever go anywhere near anything close to comedy scoring with like sort of music kind of stuff like that. And I think that's sometimes where it's interesting, because Trek has sometimes done that. I mean, obviously, sort of original series very much plays all the comedy scoring all the time, and it's like the Tribbles episode is it's pretty plinky, it's pretty cartoony. And it's charming and it's lovely, but so it's an interesting equation, but most of those things are made funnier. I mean, my Shaw's like, we're basically a hotel now remark is funny because it's said in the middle of this. He's like, I'll bring them all on. What the fuck? It's sort of that juxtaposition is what makes it funny. So he would be a tricky one, but say never.
I love it. Well, finally, we just want to congratulate you guys for joining the incredible ranks of like Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner, and more recently, Jeff Russo and Nami Melamood. Can you reflect on what it's like to share this podium and join this incredible Star Trek legacy?
Wow.
You did it, didn't you?
It's one of those things, I mean, I wanted to be a film composer since I'm 12, and I think that the first things that you kind of notice as film music is Star Trek and Star Wars. Like that's... Mm-hmm. For most people, that's the first thing that really gets you sucked into this world. And I mean, if someone had told me back then, one day you'll be scoring for Star Trek, I would have not believed it, because it's obvious. I think this is, if not the top listed bucket list item for anybody who's striving to be a film composer is to be in that world in one way or another. Steven's managed to be in both at the same time, mind you. So
yeah, literally.
I have ways to go to get to Star Wars, but I'm very grateful that Star Trek has crossed my path. So yeah, I just feeling very blessed, and kind of I have to constantly keep pinching myself that this even happened, especially since I almost didn't see that email.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, both from a standpoint of, you know, the what it means as a, you know, this wasn't even just another Star Trek series, but for what this represented in the picture. But I think then, you know, particularly with this music and particularly to be doing this kind of score, because this certainly isn't the kind of score that's been, you know, it's probably not right for every kind of like new, you know, Star Trek thing that's going to happen now or in the future, or even things that happened in the past. And so it, you know, to be able to do this and particularly when we're at the sessions, to be, you know, we're on the Warner Brothers stage where you know, I mean, Wrath of Khan was done there, and we literally pulled up, you know, one of the studio engineers pulled up, you know, he said pulled out and said like, oh, here's, by the way, we kept all of the microphone and layout sheets. They have them going back decades. He pulled it up and said, here's Wrath of Khan, you know, it's like you're looking at it, and just literally right there. And I think Star Trek 3 was there as well, and so you're standing on and it's the same podium, exact same podium that they used, and you know, to be able to stand for a while in those shoes on that podium and say, okay, we got to do this and we got to really play with this, and you know, if they don't let us ever do it in the future, I mean, still, I mean, just the experience of a lifetime. Nothing really beats it, and particularly the last session where the very last thing we recorded was the main titles, the original main titles, as we used them from the poker table onwards, and you know, you could just tell with the players. I mean, what that meant was
I never knew I
incredible.
needed. I never knew I needed the main title sequence with, like, you know, the poker game. That's so important. Like, I listen, even after this episode, I'll just say it, like, All Good Things, I think, still is the bar for me for series finales, and to, you know, have that episode end with the poker table and then have this one end with the poker table with their theme is just something that really hit me hard. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. I think that last episode has some of my favorite music to screen moments in all of Star Trek. Like the last two episodes,
Yeah.
Let's be honest, because it was just, it's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Freddie, for coming on and talking to us. Is there anything?
Pleasure.
Is there anything you guys can announce, like any upcoming projects, and where can people find you online?
We go on first on that one.
Sure.
I'm trying to think about it.
I've got Dragon Prince season 5 coming in the summer. I think there's a date, or at least a approximate date announced already somewhere online. And what else is there? You know, there's a cool movie that Rennie Holland directed that I got to score, which is a nice little possession exorcism thriller. Yeah, it was cool. It's definitely cool. And, you know, working with someone like Rennie was fun because he's obviously a legend. So yeah, those are the two things I think are worth mentioning. And you can find me anywhere online. I'm on Twitter very actively, and Instagram too. Everything's public, so anybody can reach out. I'm fairly responsive and approachable. So ask me anything.
Well, we very much. I mean, actually, I think all of us. I mean, that's the you know, Terry is very, very, very active online.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, we read everything. It's like one of those ones where, I mean, because I mean, at the end of the day, I think even if we hadn't been on it, we'd still be looking at all this stuff and kind of something, because it's just something that's I think for both of us that we love. And I have Jedi Survivor, the Star Wars Jedi Survivor, coming out on the 28th.
Can't wait.
Yeah,
which is pretty fun. It's a mammoth thing, and it's you know, it's very much our Empire Strikes Back to the first game, so that one's fun. It's dark as hell.
Eric, you're gonna have to get Steven to come back on Geeks with Kids to talk about Fallen Order.
It's one of my favorite games.
Yeah,
we'll get Gordy in, who's good fun as well. So he's so we have that, and then I've got a project called The First Descendant, which is a thing a fabulous game that Nexon have made. It's like a kind of lucha shooter game, but with an awesome sort of backstory and kind of superhero kind of thing going on. And I've got about like 3 or 4 other things kicking about, but nothing with this firm release date yet, but things I'm working on. So, and more Apex Legends and stuff like that. So it's fun. So.
Yeah, amazing. Julian, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I'll take us home. Guys, it has just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Freddie, Stephen, this was just an absolute blast. And thank you for this amazing contribution to Star Trek. It's something that is just very important to myself, to Eric, to all of our collective, our listeners, our fans. So thank you guys for coming on. That is going to do it for this one. We are back live next week. I actually don't know what our episode is next week, but it's going to be something. It's going to be fun. It's going to be Star Trek. And I think we're going to do the biggest emotional moments for all of us.
Just so we can cry.
So we're going to cry some
good.
more.
Yeah,
I think that's coming up. So guys, thank you again. For Eric, for me, I'm Julian. I will say live long and prosper. Majram. Good night.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.